Have you ever wondered why some people panic over small things? Why some people can't trust anyone? Or why some people feel broken without knowing what broke them? What if I told you that the biggest damage in your life didn't happen yesterday? It happened when you were too young to understand it. Imagine this: a perfectly fine machine. Powerful, expensive, advanced. Now imagine a tiny worm entering its system. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent. Over time, that single worm destroys the entire machine from the inside. No one notices until it's too late. That's exactly how childhood trauma works. It doesn't scream. It doesn't warn you. It quietly rewires your brain, your confidence, your emotions, your relationships. And one day, in your 20s or 30s, you're angry, anxious, insecure, overthinking everything. And you keep asking yourself, why am I like this? This video is not about blaming parents, not about digging up pain for drama, and not about calling yourself broken. This video is about understanding. Because once you understand what entered your mind years ago, you finally understand how to take your power back. Stay with me till the end, because somewhere in this story, you might recognize yourself. It was supposed to be just another boring morning at the robotics lab. Coffee machines humming, computers booting up, engineers half asleep and already late. But that day, chaos showed up early. A full-blown swarm of insects crashed into the lab like they owned the place. Not one or two bugs, hundreds. Crawling on machines, wires, screens, everywhere. Within minutes, alarms went off, and the entire lab was evacuated. No drama, no heroics, just people rushing out, confused and irritated. The crest control team was called in immediately. By the time they arrived, the place looked wrecked. Tiny wings stuck to circuits, dirt in sensitive hardware, a nightmare for anyone who understands machines. After hours of cleaning, spraying, sealing, and swatting, the lab was finally cleared. Problem solved. Or so everyone thought. Night fell. Lights were off. Doors locked. Silence. And that's when it happened. One robot, powered down, lifeless, standing in the corner, suddenly malfunctioned. No commands, no human interaction. Just a glitch. Somewhere deep inside its main processor, a single worm had survived. One. That worm crawled around all night, chewing through microcircuits, damaging pathways, corrupting systems quietly. No alarms, no warnings, no obvious signs. Morning came. Engineers returned. At first glance, everything looked normal, until someone noticed that the robot wasn't responding the way it should. They opened it up, found the worm, and removed it immediately. But it was already too late. The damage was permanent. The robot's internal system was fried beyond repair. It looked fine on the outside, but inside? Broken, useless, discarded. Now here's the twist. This story isn't really about a robot. And it sure as hell isn't about a worm. It's about us. Because life works the same damn way. From childhood, experiences crawl into our minds, some loud, some subtle, some we don't even notice. Moments, words, incidents, embarrassments, fear, shame, rejection, pain. And most of the time, we don't even realize they're there. But they stay. They crawl around quietly in our mental processors, messing with confidence, short-circuiting decision-making, hijacking emotions, warping self-image. Then, one day, in our 20s or 30s, we wonder, why do I get angry so fast? Why do I overthink everything? Why do I freeze when I need to make decisions? Why do relationships feel exhausting? Why does success still feel empty? We blame luck. We blame people. We blame society. But what if the real problem entered way earlier? Psychologists often say this: your adult personality is just your childhood unfinished business wearing grown-up clothes. Some people become extremely shy. Some explode in anger over tiny things. Some constantly feel anxious, lost, or stuck. Some can't trust anyone. Some keep pleasing others even at the cost of their own happiness. And the wild part? Many of these problems wouldn't even exist if that worm had never entered the system. That worm has a name: childhood trauma. Not always big, dramatic trauma. Not always abuse or violence. Sometimes it's small, repeated moments that taught your brain the wrong lessons. And the scariest part? Most people don't even know they're carrying it. According to global studies, the majority of humans experience some form of trauma before adulthood. But very few understand what to do with it or even realize it's affecting them at all. That's why this isn't just another motivational story. This is for anyone who feels stuck but can't explain why. For anyone suffering today because of something that happened years ago. For anyone who feels broken without knowing what broke them. A famous neurologist once said that our mental state isn't shaped by one big event. It's shaped by accumulated experiences, especially early ones. Even the things we forgot were never really forgotten. Your mind remembers everything, and those memories act like a handbrake. No matter how powerful your engine is, you can't move forward properly if the brake is still pulled. In the next parts, we're going to expose those handbrakes. We'll break down the most common childhood traumas. We'll see how they silently control our personality, relationships, and confidence. And most importantly, we'll learn how to release them. Because growth doesn't start with hustle, it starts with awareness. But what if trauma isn't just emotional? What if it can literally shut down the human body itself? In the next part, you'll hear a real case where fear turned a healthy teenager into a wheelchair-bound patient, and how it shocked even doctors. Most people think trauma lives only in the mind, like it just makes you sad, anxious, or overthinky. But here's the uncomfortable truth no one talks about enough. Trauma doesn't stop at your thoughts. It leaks into your body. And when it does, things can get terrifyingly real. Let me tell you about a case that shook even experienced doctors. In August 2025, a neurologist from Hyderabad shared a story online that blew up everywhere. News portals picked it up. Social media went wild. Because what happened didn't make logical sense, at least not on the surface. The patient was a 15-year-old girl. Bright, intelligent, good at school, no medical history, no major issues. One day, she casually told her parents something felt off. Her legs felt weak. At first, no one panicked. Teenagers complain all the time, right? Maybe fatigue, maybe dehydration, maybe she wasn't eating properly, normal stuff. But then the weakness didn't go away. A few days later, she started limping. Another week passed, and now she couldn't walk properly. 2 weeks in, she was in a wheelchair. Let that sink in. A healthy teenage girl who was walking just fine a month ago suddenly couldn't stand. Her parents freaked out, obviously. They rushed her to doctors, blood tests, vitamin levels, electrolytes. Everything came back normal. They escalated the case. Neurologists stepped in. MRI scans of the brain and spine. Nerve conduction tests. Still normal. Nothing. Zero explanation. That's when one doctor made a crucial decision. He asked to speak to her alone. No parents, no pressure, no interruptions. Just a safe space. And that's when the real story spilled out. For months, her classmates had been targeting her, mocking her weight, laughing at her appearance, making fun of her glasses, whispering, pointing, snickering. Every single day. At school, at recess, even online. She smiled on the outside, stayed quiet, told herself to ignore it. But inside? Fear, shame, humiliation were stacking up like bricks. Eventually, her mind couldn't hold it anymore. So it handed the burden to the body. Doctors later explained it as a functional neurological disorder, where emotional trauma manifests as physical symptoms. No injury, no disease. Just overwhelming mental stress hijacking physical control. Once therapy began, psychological support, counseling, emotional validation, the miracle happened. Within weeks, she started walking again. Her legs weren't broken. Her confidence was. This is called bullying and shaming trauma. And no, this isn't some rare, dramatic case. According to global education reports, hundreds of millions of students face bullying every year. And bullying doesn't always mean punches or extreme abuse. Sometimes it's jokes, nicknames, comparisons, harmless teasing that never stops. We spend nearly 18 years of our life in schools and colleges during the exact phase when our emotional brain is fully active, but our logical brain is still under construction. So when something hurts during that time, it doesn't get processed rationally, it gets absorbed. That's why the kid who was laughed at in class still hesitates to speak in meetings. The one who is mocked for looks still avoids mirrors. The one who is constantly shut down still doubts every opinion. And here's the thing people miss. Trauma doesn't need to be dramatic to be damaging. It just needs to be repeated. 1,000 tiny cuts can hurt more than one deep wound. What felt like just school stuff back then may be silently shaping your confidence today. But school isn't the only battlefield. As we grow older, the world doesn't get gentler, it gets louder. Expectations pile up, competition increases. And sometimes, the next trauma hits even harder. If school bullying can paralyze a body, what do you think constant pressure, expectations, and fear of failure can do to a young mind? In the next part, you'll hear a heartbreaking real-life story of a student who felt so crushed by expectations that he started believing the world would be better without him. There's a dangerous lie we've all grown up hearing. If you work hard enough, everything will be fine. Sounds motivating, right? But nobody tells you what happens when working hard still doesn't feel enough. In August 2025, another news story surfaced. It didn't trend for long, it didn't shock people the way it should have. But for those who paid attention, it was disturbing. A student named Shivam left his small hometown in Bihar with big dreams, just like millions of others. Engineering degree, stable job, proud parents, respect in society, the classic script. He moved to Noida, joined a private university, and started his bachelor in computer science. First year, manageable. New city excitement, new friends, new routines. Then reality hit. Second year came with heavier subjects, higher expectations, relentless competition, endless comparisons. Someone was always doing better. Someone was always ahead. Someone always seemed more confident, smarter, faster. Slowly, pressure started piling up. Family expectations whispered in his ear every time he called home. Society screamed success stories everywhere he looked. Grades became identity. Performance became worth. Semesters passed. Anxiety grew. One night, alone in his hostel room, Shivam picked up a pen and started writing. Not an assignment, a goodbye note. He didn't act immediately. Part of him still hoped things would change, still tried, still pushed himself to stay strong. But on 15 of August, something inside him snapped. His note said something that hits like a punch to the chest. I can't take this pressure anymore. He called himself a failure, a burden, someone who didn't fit into the education system. He even asked his parents to take back the remaining college fees, like he felt guilty for costing them money. That's the most heartbreaking part. When someone feels so worthless that they apologize for existing. Now pause for a second. This story isn't rare. It's repeating. Every year, student suicides flood headlines, then disappear, then repeat. Numbers blur into statistics. But here's what no one wants to confront honestly. Most students don't collapse because of one exam. They collapse because of years of conditioning. From childhood, we're trained to chase numbers. Marks equals intelligence. Ranks equals respect. Job equals value. Love becomes conditional. Praise is performance-based. Failure feels like rejection. Add body shaming, social comparisons, and constant judgment to that mix and boom. You don't just get stressed students. You get emotionally exhausted humans who feel trapped in a race they never chose. Studies show that a huge percentage of young people hate how they look, feel inferior to others, and constantly compare their lives. Social media amplifies it. Everyone else's highlight reel becomes your personal nightmare, and the worst part? Many don't even realize they're traumatized. They just think, I'm weak, I'm lazy, I'm not good enough. But what if the system broke them long before they blamed themselves? This kind of trauma doesn't always lead to extreme outcomes. Sometimes it shows up quietly. Low self-esteem, aggressive behavior, chronic anxiety, constant self-doubt, feeling behind in life no matter what you achieve. And while some people eventually adapt or numb themselves, others carry this pressure trauma deep into adulthood. But here's where it gets even deeper. There's one form of trauma that almost everyone experiences, but hardly anyone recognizes. It doesn't come from teachers. It doesn't come from classmates. It doesn't come from exams. It comes from the people we needed the most. What happens when a child doesn't get emotional safety, even in a normal family? In the next part, you'll see a chilling experiment that proves how lack of emotional connection can silently destroy curiosity, joy, and relationships for life. Here's something uncomfortable most people don't like hearing. You can grow up in a good family and still be emotionally damaged. No abuse, no violence, no screaming headlines, just absence. Years ago, psychologists ran an experiment that still gives experts chills. It involved very young children, barely 1 year old. Toddlers who, according to society, shouldn't even remember anything yet. In the first setup, they brought in children who grew up in stable homes, parents around, emotional warmth, care, attention. The room had toys, blocks, colors. The kids? Fully engaged, curious, playful, alive. They grabbed the blocks, chewed on them, threw them, laughed, got bored, got curious again. Normal child behavior. Then came the second group. These children weren't abused. No one hurt them physically. But they grew up without consistent emotional attention, some in institutions, some in unstable caregiving environments. Same rooms, same blocks. But the reaction? Terrifyingly different. Some kids didn't even touch the toys. Some stared blankly at the adults instead of playing. Some clung to the experimenter's presence like their life depended on it. Some looked restless, anxious, uncomfortable, like joy itself felt unsafe. Researchers noticed something shocking. Curiosity was missing. These kids weren't exploring the world. They were scanning for safety. The term psychologists used was emotional deprivation. And here's the part that messes with your head. These children were barely 1 year old. Yet the lack of emotional connection had already rewired how they interacted with the world. Now imagine that pattern continuing for 10, 15, 20 years. This doesn't mean parents are bad people. Most parents love their kids deeply. But love isn't just about intention, it's about emotional availability. Sometimes love comes with conditions. Be strong, don't cry, get good marks. Don't embarrass us. Why can't you be like that kid? Slowly, the child learns lessons that feel normal but hit hard later. Love must be earned. Emotions are inconvenient. Crying is weakness. Approval comes from achievement. So what happens when that child grows up? They overperform in relationships. They struggle to express feelings. They fear abandonment. They crave validation. They stay in unhealthy dynamics just to feel chosen. Some people become extreme people pleasers. Some become emotionally distant. Some chase love like oxygen. Some sabotage relationships before getting too close. And most of them say the same thing. I don't know why I'm like this. That's attachment trauma. It's not about what happened to you. It's about what you didn't get when you needed it. If you were praised only when you succeeded, your brain learned my worth equals performance. If you were shut down for expressing emotions, your brain learned feelings are unsafe. If your needs were ignored, your brain learned I must adjust to be loved. These lessons don't disappear with age. They show up in your 20s, in your relationships, in your career, in how you treat yourself. And here's the scary part. You can be successful, confident on the outside, and still carry this wound quietly inside. But here's the good news. Awareness changes everything. Once you understand why you react the way you do, the shame begins to fade. You stop calling yourself broken and start seeing patterns. And patterns can be changed. That's why the next part matters more than anything we've discussed so far. Because knowing the problem is only step one. Healing requires action. So how do you actually break these patterns? How do you identify the hidden triggers controlling your reactions? In the next part, you'll learn the first step to healing trauma, a step so powerful that many people feel lighter just by doing it once. Most people think healing trauma means doing something big, like confronting someone or revisiting painful memories or fixing themselves overnight. But healing doesn't start with fixing. It starts with realizing. That's the first and most powerful step. Because until you realize what's actually controlling you, you'll keep fighting shadows. Here's the truth nobody told us growing up. You don't overreact randomly. You react from memory. Every strong emotional reaction you have today, anger, fear, anxiety, jealousy, has a root. And that root almost always traces back to the past. The easiest way to identify it? Watch what triggers you. Not the obvious stuff, the disproportionate reactions. Ask yourself, why does this small comment bother me so much? Why do I freeze when I need to decide? Why do I panic when someone disagrees with me? Why do I feel rejected so easily? Now let's make this real. Imagine someone who struggles badly with decision-making. Simple choices feel overwhelming. They get anxious. They keep asking others, "What do you think?" even for small things. At first glance, it looks like low confidence. But when you dig deeper, you often find a pattern. As a child, every time they expressed an opinion, they were shut down. Don't talk back. Elders know better. You don't understand anything. So the brain learns something dangerous. Making choices is unsafe. Fast forward to adulthood. Now every decision feels like a threat. Not because the person is weak, but because their brain is trying to protect them from an old danger. Here's another one. Fear of failure. Someone becomes extremely self-critical. One mistake, and they mentally destroy themselves. Why? Because love used to be conditional. When they performed well, praise, affection, approval. When they failed, silence, disappointment, withdrawal. So the brain wired success with love and failure with rejection. Now adulthood feels like walking on a tightrope. This is why realization is so powerful. The moment you say, "Oh, this isn't random. This makes sense," something shifts. You stop hating yourself. You stop calling yourself broken. You stop wondering what's wrong with me. Instead, you say, this reaction was learned. And what was learned can be unlearned. Another powerful way to realize trauma is by spotting patterns. What keeps repeating in your life? Same type of relationship? Same power imbalance? Same jealousy? Same self-doubt despite achievements? Patterns don't lie. You weren't born comparing yourself to others. Someone taught your brain that comparison equals worth. You weren't born afraid of authority. Something in your past made authority feel unsafe. And here's the wild part. Many people feel a rush of relief just by realizing this. Not because the pain disappears, but because the confusion does. For the first time, your story makes sense. That moment of clarity, that's the door opening. But realization alone isn't enough. Because knowing why something hurts doesn't remove the pain trapped inside. That pain needs an exit. And that's where the next step comes in. What happens when you finally let out everything you've been holding in for years? In the next part, you'll learn why releasing trauma can feel like opening a shaken bottle, and how doing it the right way can change your emotional weight overnight. Here's something most people don't realize. Trauma doesn't hurt the most when it happens. It hurts the most when it stays unexpressed. Think of it like this. You shake a soda bottle hard, but never open it. All that pressure stays trapped inside. That's exactly what happens when emotions get buried. We're taught early, don't cry, move on, be strong. It's not a big deal. So, we swallow anger, we suppress fear, we silence grief, we lock away shame. And then we wonder why we feel heavy all the time. Releasing trauma doesn't mean creating drama. It means giving your emotions a safe exit. And no, you don't need to confront anyone. You don't need closure from people who hurt you. You don't need their apology. You need expression. I've seen people carry trauma for decades, and the moment they finally spoke about it, something shifted instantly. Not magically fixed, but lighter, because the mind relaxes when it's finally heard. One simple example. A woman who was constantly mocked for her weight in school grew up deeply insecure. Confident career, successful life, but emotionally fragile. She still heard those voices. I asked her to do something unusual. Write a letter to the people who made fun of you. Not to send, not to forgive immediately, just to write. She poured everything into it. Anger, pain, confusion, tears. By the time she finished, she said something powerful. I didn't know I was still carrying this. That's release. Release can look different for different people. Writing, talking, crying, voice notes, screaming into a pillow, therapy. Even movement, dancing, running, shaking it out. Your body remembers what your mind avoids. When trauma stays inside, it leaks out as anxiety, irritability, emotional numbness, sudden anger, chronic exhaustion. Release doesn't erase the past, but it stops the past from controlling the present. Here's the key rule though, and this matters a lot. Release is not blaming. You're not doing this to accuse anyone. You're doing this to free yourself. Sometimes when people release trauma, they realize something shocking. The people who hurt them were also hurt. That doesn't excuse behavior, but it helps the nervous system soften. Because holding hatred is exhausting. Release doesn't mean forgetting. It means unclenching. And once the pressure reduces, once the emotions finally breathe, something powerful becomes possible. Change. But here's the catch. If you release trauma without changing the mental wiring underneath, the same patterns will come back. Because the brain loves defaults. That's why the final step matters the most. So, how do you stop your brain from falling back into old patterns again and again? In the final part, you'll learn how to rewire your mind, break old conditioning, and consciously build a new emotional default. Here's the truth most people miss. You can realize your trauma. You can release your pain, but if you don't rewire your thinking, your brain will quietly drag you back to the same old patterns. Why? Because the brain loves familiarity, even when familiarity hurts. Your mind isn't designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you safe. So it keeps replaying old programs: fear-based thinking, overthinking, people-pleasing, avoidance, self-criticism. Not because they're correct, but because they're familiar. Rewiring means teaching your brain a new default. Let's make this simple. Close your eyes for a second and imagine an apple. What color was it? Red, right? Because your brain has seen red apples its whole life. That's the default image. Now, imagine that same apple, black. It feels unnatural at first, but you can do it. That's rewiring. Your brain automatically jumps to old images, old meanings, old reactions, but with intention and repetition, you can change them. Trauma created meanings like love equals approval, mistakes equals danger, authority equals fear, comparison equals self-worth. Rewiring means consciously installing new meanings. Love equals mutual respect. Mistakes equals learning. Authority equals neutral. Comparison equals inspiration, not judgment. This doesn't happen in one day. It happens through practice. Here are some powerful ways rewiring actually works in real life. First, catch the pattern. The moment you feel triggered, pause. Ask, what is my brain trying to protect me from? Not what's wrong with me, but where did this come from? That shift alone reduces emotional intensity. Second, coach yourself, don't judge. Most people talk to themselves like enemies. Rewiring requires becoming your own coach. Instead of, I messed up, I'm useless, try, I see why this feels hard. I'm learning. I'm allowed to make mistakes. Stand in front of the mirror if you have to. Look yourself in the eye. Talk with honesty, not cruelty. It feels awkward. It works anyway. Third, visualize the new you. Your brain responds to images. Spend a few minutes every day imagining you speaking confidently, you setting boundaries, you staying calm under pressure, you choosing yourself without guilt. The brain doesn't fully differentiate between real and imagined repetition. This literally rewires neural pathways. Fourth, change your environment. Your surroundings are silently training your mind. Your phone feed, your content, your music, your room, your conversations. If your environment keeps feeding fear, comparison, and negativity, rewiring becomes harder. Curate what enters your mind. That's not weakness. That's intelligence. Fifth, be patient with the process. Here's the most important part. Healing is not linear. Some days you'll feel strong. Some days old patterns will resurface. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means your brain is updating. Even a slow update is still progress. I'll share something personal. For years, certain situations triggered intense fear responses in my body, even when logically nothing was wrong. My mind had moved on, but my nervous system hadn't. Once I understood why my body reacted that way, everything changed. I stopped fighting it. I reassured myself. I stayed present. And slowly, the reaction faded. Not overnight, but permanently. That's rewiring. Here's the final thing I want you to remember. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are a person who adapted to survive. And now, you're allowed to evolve. If your past has been acting like a handbrake, you can release it. You can accelerate. You can live lighter. And if at any point you feel overwhelmed, getting professional help is not failure. It's strength. Healing doesn't mean doing it alone. It means doing it right. The past may have written the first draft of your life, but the next chapters are still yours to write. And this time, you're holding the pen. The moral of this story is simple, but life-changing. The past does not disappear just because we ignore it. Small moments from childhood, words, reactions, silence, comparisons, quietly shape how we think, feel, and react as adults. What once helped us survive can later become the very thing holding us back. But awareness changes everything. When we understand why we react the way we do, we stop blaming ourselves. When we express what we've carried for years, the weight begins to lift. And when we consciously rewire old patterns, we reclaim control over our lives. Healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means learning from it without being trapped by it. The moment you recognize your hidden wounds, you stop being controlled by them. and start becoming the person you were always meant to be. If you're still here, thank you, not just for watching, but for listening. Because stories like this aren't meant to scare us. They're meant to wake us up. What you heard today wasn't about trauma as a label. It was about how quietly the past can shape the present. How small moments repeated over time can pull invisible strings in our lives. And maybe the most important realization isn't what happened back then, but what's possible from here. You're not weak for reacting the way you do. You're not broken for struggling with things others seem to handle easily. You adapted. You survived. You learned patterns that once protected you. And now you get to choose whether those patterns still deserve control. Awareness is the first release. Expression is the second. Rewiring is where freedom begins. This isn't about erasing the past. It's about refusing to let it decide your future. And if today's story made you pause, if something felt uncomfortably familiar, that doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something inside you is ready to heal. Take your time. Be patient with yourself. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop running from your story and finally listen to it. Until next time, take care of your mind, be gentle with your heart, and keep choosing growth over fear. If this story made you pause, if something here felt uncomfortably familiar, then don't scroll away like nothing happened. Hit subscribe, not for me, but for yourself. Because this channel isn't about motivation that fades overnight. It's about understanding your mind, healing old wounds, and becoming the version of you that life never slowed down. If this video helped you even a little, show some love in the comments. It tells me you're here and you're not alone. And share this with someone who's been silent lately. Someone who smiles on the outside but carries too much inside. Healing spreads when stories are shared. Subscribe, stay connected, and let's grow. Not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly.